Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be somewhat of a rambling video. The subject is going to be how to use arcane spells in a military aspect. So in bigger groups and scenarios than a party of adventurers. And how that could affect, say, medieval warfare, since this is a fantasy setting that we would normally depict in medieval times. So I'm going to limit this video to first level arcane spells. I'll do another video of first level divine spells, and then we'll go up from there. I'll put a level cap at 6th level spells, so there'll probably be about a dozen videos in this category. But we'll look at the spells, we'll look at some of the ranges and descriptions, and then we'll go, how would you counter that? How could you use this in a very unique way? And just really dive into this. So, without further ado, let's start with the 0 level spells and we'll combine them into the first level spells for this. So remember, you're in an army of 100, we'll say 50 to 250 soldiers would be the rough estimate. It could be a lot bigger than this, and it could be a lot, well, I wouldn't say a lot smaller. After you get below about 50, you're almost into adventurer territory. So, 0 level spells. What would be useful for an army? Detect magic would always be useful if there's magical traps. If you want to know who's the spellcaster on the enemy line, you detect magic. So that could be very useful in a military aspect. A couple of your mages just casting detect magic and looking across the battlefield. You probably have to be close, because I don't remember the range of detect magic offhand. Hold on, it's right here. 60 feet. So in 60 feet, you would know who the spellcasters are. And if, say, you created a first level version of that, you could do 120 feet. Or you could even do line of sight for first level, because you're using a spell slot at that point instead of it being free every round. So there's detect magic. Detect poisons, okay, it can be useful if the enemy's using poisons, but on a military scale, it's not that great. Daze isn't very good. Dancing lights. Dancing lights is good because now nobody has to use torches at night because they're floating around the mage. Also, the spell light's good. The only difference is dancing light's better in this application, because light you cast on a single object, and every time you cast it, the first spell goes away. So dancing lights creates up to like 3 floating lights that you can kind of disperse around. Flare would be good, especially if you give it, well, flare would be good because you could just shoot a light into the air and use the flare on it and treat it like a modern flare where it gets really bright. So that could signal a good combat or the beginning of a march or the beginning of an attack. It could also be the signal of a retreat, especially if you combine, say, prestidigitation to change the color of the light. And I'm always for combining spells. It just requires 2 castings instead of 1, and you can't take damage between the 2, or if you do, you got to make a save for both spells. Ghost sounds would be real useful, especially if you wanted to give a loud trumpet blast or use something very unique noise-wise, especially if your caster is higher than first level, because the amount of noise it can make amplifies upwards tremendously. Bleed is Disrupt undead can be good if you're fighting a whole lot of undead armies. So think about 10 spellcasters and, say, an army of 250 casting Disrupt undead every turn. It's a ray, range touch, but if you're firing at a wall of undead, you're going to hit one. And then you just have to figure out how many go down. So that one could be very useful in that scale. But in an undead army scale, your best bet's just a cleric with champ. But as has been found out in my high level camp, my highly funded low-level campaign that I'm running on Sundays. The undead that they're fighting that are easy to destroy have been marked with pretty much magic traps that when they're destroyed, it triggers. And that's wiped out the clerics that could take out the undead. Touch of fatigue, well, that could fatigue the soldiers. If you had a strike force going in at the enemy's camp the night before a raid, you could use touch of fatigue on all the horses, especially if fatigue lasts more than a combat round. Mage hands, 5-pound telekinesis. Mending can be used very usefully in a military aspect. Message would be good in a military aspect, sending messages short distances in a whisper on the wind. Arcane mark could be very useful to mark areas. Describes personal rooms on object or creature, visible or invisible. So cast a few invisible arcane marks around as you're making a trail, and then somebody goes behind with detect magic and sees them and know they're yours. They know what's going on and where they should be going. Now let's dive into the first level spells. Alarm. Wards an area for 2 hours, so you get a few mages casting alarm around. You don't have to have as many guards active, especially if they're in a fortified position. But in a military aspect, I'd always have guards active if it was my military. Endure elements could be good when you're marching over long distances in the hot desert or cold winter, but it does not negate the damage, which makes it kind of useless compared to, say, the 3rd edition version of that, where it would have negated 5 points of damage. So here's where I don't quite agree with some of the changes they made. Hold Portal. Now that's a good spell for military use. You could go through the door, cast Hold Portal on the door, and now the enemy is stuck there and bottlenecked there for as many rounds as you need as you start dropping shit down on them through the murder holes. Shield spell's okay, especially against magic missiles, real good. If your army is fighting creatures that are not native to the plane, protection from chaos, evil, good, law can be very useful. But the problem is it's not mass, so at first level it's not quite as useful. Grease is real good. Cast grease on a doorway. Now the military has to move through a greased floor, greased area, and people are going to be falling. So you're not only going to bottleneck them, you're also going to slow them down. So grease is a good military application, but that one's more limited to going into a structure than it is on, say, the open battlefield. Obscuring Mist could be good. Let's actually look that one up to see how big of an area it affects. Obscuring Mist, casting time 1 standard action, components, verbal, somatic, range 20 feet, so it's limited. Cloud spreads 20-foot radius from you, 20 foot high. So 20-foot radius means it'll occupy a 40-foot area, 20 feet high. That can be useful. You get 10 of those spread out, you're going to cover 40 feet per casting. You'll cover 400-foot spread that the enemy can't really see you, and if they're further than 5 feet away, they have a 20% miss chance, and if they're 50% miss chance if they're further than 5 feet away. The only problem is a gust of wind spell can get rid of this, or a moderate natural wind can get rid of this. But on a very calm day, especially a calm morning, you could set your soldiers up, you could maneuver your soldiers, especially if they have, like if you have your battle plan pretty set and you know what your enemy's roughly going to do, that could be a good game changer in a single battle. So we went over that. Mount. Mount can be good. You summon a riding horse for 2 hours per level. So you need higher level for it to be super effective, but you got 10 first level wizards casting Mount. They can move their army, assuming they double up on it. You can move your army, at least half your army, super quick in 2 hours. You cast it multiple times, you're looking at very, very good distance. If you give, hell, if you just put scrolls of Mount, even first level casting, into the hands of a bunch of mages, you could travel, if there's enough of it, you could travel the army for a day, 8 hours, without worrying about mounts getting tired, without needing to feed mounts, without needing to take care of mounts. And at the end of that, your army would be hell of a lot further, closer to wherever you needed it to be. Now let's look up a little bit more about mounts. One mount, 2 hours per level. So there's no change to the speed of the mount. So you summon an actual creature that moves at that mount speed. You said like a light horse or a pony. A light horse's speed is 60 feet. So you're looking at a good day's travel in a couple hours. Okay. So that's a great way to move an army around. Summon monster one's not that useful unless you're, say, summoning a hawk to an aerial creature to scout and then come back and report to you. But me and my friends all agree, some monster 1 and 2, some monsters of your level aren't that effective because of how weak they are compared to what you're normally fighting of your level. Unseen Servant, that can be useful. Use that to set up tripwires and things like that. I wonder if they're powerful enough to trigger traps. Let's look them up. Unseen Servant, one invisible, mindless, shapeless servant, 1 hour per level. It can run and fetch things, open unstuck doors, and hold chairs, as well as clean and mend. So you can use this to open doors. So if you think the door's trapped, but you know it's not locked, you can use the Unseen Servant to open the door and trigger the trap. You can use it to hold a door open, and you can then proceed to shoot ranged effects through the doorway. So an Unseen Servant could make a small change in what's going on. You could use it to stretch a rope and tie off in an area, so you create a trip wire. The Unseen Servant can't attack in any way. It is not allowed in an attack roll, and it cannot be killed. But if 6 points of damage from an area attack is dealt, it dissipates. So, tripwire, it's not attacking, it's tying off a rope. Opening a door, it's opening a door. So, under the limits of the spell, this thing can be useful in a good combat situation. Let's go into, okay, comprehend languages. You could taunt your enemies in their language, but I don't really see that as being extra useful for big military use. Now, that would help you if you got a hold of enemy documents, then you can translate them and know what they're up to, assuming they're not giving you fake documents. Detect secret doors, that can always be useful, but I never find that quite as useful as a rogue's ability. But as far as military goes, that could be a good way to find out where the hidden exits are from the fortress that you're trying to attack. Detect undead can always be useful, especially if you've been fighting undead. Identify, in a military aspect, identify is not useful. True Strike can be very useful. very useful. You managed to get a hold of, say, some fireball beads. You can cast True Strike and use a sling. You can sling those fireball beads wherever the hell you want with a plus 20. That, if you roll a 1, is not considered a 1. It is considered 1 plus the bonuses plus 20 to hit where you're aiming for. And if you're aiming for a specific square, the AC of a square is 5 plus your range penalties. So let's go into enchantment. Charm person. Useful to get information from somebody, but not necessarily in a military aspect to control the battlefield. Hypnotism. Fascinates 2d4 hit dice of creatures. That could be okay. You get 10 of them out there, so that's 2 to 8. So that's 20 to 80 creatures. Yeah, I could see that could take out a section of an army. At least disable them for a short time. Sleep can put 4 hit dice of creatures into a magical slumber, but the error effect's huge. So sleep's pretty good too. Since all the hit dice of normal soldiers is 1, some monsters is half, sleep could be pretty good. You could end up taking out 40 soldiers with 10 spellcasters in the example we've been using. Burning Hands, offensive spell, cone effect. You have to be too close for that to be super effective. Floating Disc can be okay to transport a lot of material without needing horses and stuff. Magic Missile doesn't quite do the damage stopping power you would need to take out a military, but if you wanted to specify a target, say take out that drummer boy, or say take out that flag bearer, or say that's the commander, you get your 10 mages in the army of 250 to all fire magic missile at it, and you go, okay, so 10d4 plus 10. That can be a little bit useful. Then you got Shocking Grasp. Shocking Grasp would be okay. The only way I would use Burning Hands and Shocking Grasp is if I could put it on an item and allow the soldiers to use that item. Give it maybe 1 use per week. It could also be 1 use per day. Giving it that range would allow it to be useful to them, because all of a sudden they can deal out this real quickly. And if they're used to being in melee combat, say it's a fighter, a spear and shield fighter, and you put it on the shield, he could present the shield, say the command word to activate it, and whatever is attacking his shield gets Shocking Grasp, or a cone effect of fire is breathed out of like the lion's mouth that's on the shield. And that could help you weaken an army unexpectedly. Collar Spray. Now that one could be useful. Let me look up Collar Spray and see what the ranges are. Collar Spray. Range 15 feet, so very close. Cone-shaped burst, so like Burning Hands. If it's 2 hit dice or less, creature is unconscious, blinded, and stunned. 3 to 4 hit dice, blinded and stunned. 5 or more hit dice, creature is stunned for 1 round. So either way, you've stunned the creature. It gets a save, but either way, you've stunned the creature. So it's will save negates. So if it's 5 hit dice or more, it's more than likely they're going to make that save. But if you were targeting 15 feet, so 3, 4, 5, you could essentially go 3 rows into a military formation with this. Put this on the shield like Burning Hands, have it once per day, once per week, 3 times per day, who knows. However much you want to spend on the military's equipment. being that you're using magic for this, it would be entertaining to slowly give them all this magical equipment that can do all the crazy stuff. But they present that, since most soldiers in the front row are going to be 2 hit dice or less, you've made them unconscious, they're blinded, and they're stunned. They're blinded for 1d4 rounds and they're stunned for 1 round after the unconsciousness for 2d4 rounds happens. So you're taking out 3 figures per casting. Even if you only equip 10 soldiers with that, that's 30 people in a military formation that's taken out. And that's assuming they're in tight formation. Now, if you're fighting like the weird barbarian formations that are not militarily rank and file, then it won't be quite as effective. But if the soldier doesn't panic, he can use it at the right time and catch the most in it. And with that, that would give you a decent control, because those that are unconscious for 2d4 rounds, well, in 2d4 rounds, they can be dispatched. So, disguise self, that'd be good for scouting and spying. Magic ore, that'd be good if you wanted to hide your mages, or you wanted the enemy to think you had a hell of a lot more mages, or if you wanted an object to seem more magical than it is. Silent image. Silent image would be good if you wanted to create, say, duplicates of your soldiers in the army for them to think that they are now outnumbered when they weren't previously. Let me look that one up to make sure it works completely that way. Silent image. This spell creates a visual illusion of an object, creature, or force as visualized by you. The illusion does not create sound, smell, texture, or temperature. You can move the image within the limits of the size of the effect. Range, long, 400 feet plus 40 feet per level. The illusions are limited to a 10-foot cube plus 1 10-foot cube per level. So you can place multiple of them in that range. So that would be very useful for deception in a battle. Ventriloquism, throw your voice for 1 minute per level. That would be good in a scouting, spying situation, not necessarily in an open battle, unless you were trying to give false commands to the enemy's soldiers. That would be interesting to use it for. Cause fear. 1 creature of 5 hit dice or less flees for 1d4 rounds. That could be useful against horses. And that could make cavalry charge very interesting. Chilled touch, 1 touch per level, deals 1d6 damage, possible 1 strength. Not that effective for combat. Ray of enfeeblement. Ray causes 1d6 strength penalty plus 1 per 2 levels. That's still a single target, so that one's not going to be as useful. Animate rope. Now that can be useful. Throw a couple of pieces of 50-foot rope out there, then cast animate rope. Each of your spellcasters have scrolls of it. Pull it out, cast animate rope. You can have the rope start engulfing the enemies as they've been approaching through the fields, especially if you set those ropes out the night before. Enlarge person. Humanoid creature doubles in its size. Reduce person. Humanoid creature halves in size. Using reduce and enlarge, you'd probably have to use it at a higher level and take it away from just being person to object. You can shrink down a ballista bolt, fire it through a crossbow. Set up like a ring, a hoop ring with the opposite spell in it when the bolt passes through the ring or the ammunition passes through the ring, because you could do the same thing with a regular bow. And you could do the same thing with a musket. When the ammunition passes through the ring, it turns back to full size and continues the flight pattern of whatever the bow's range increment was. You would use the ranged attack that you had, but the damage would be like a ballista does 3d6 damage. So instead of doing the 1d8 or 1d10 of a crossbow, you do 3d6 plus your strength points and damage when you hit. And if all your bolts are that way, that's essentially a ballista bolt every turn you fire. If it's a light crossbow, you can fire every turn. If it's heavy crossbow, it's every other turn. But that is far faster than a regular ballista. So adding this magic to the combat would really change the effectiveness of the forces. You apply that to cannonballs, shrink them down, put them in the muskets, put them into blunderbusses, and have a weird contraption holding the hoop thing in front that it's going to fire through, and then you have the same effect going on. You just have to have whoever's casting the reduce able to make it permanent to give it to your soldiers. Otherwise, your spellcaster is the one that has to reduce it, load it in, and then fire it or hand it off to be fired. Erase mundane or magical writing vanishes. That can be useful if you want to hide your messages after you've received them or as you were inscribing stuff out and making your plans. Expeditious retreat. Your speed increases by 30 feet. Let's see how long that lasts. Expeditious retreat. Lasts 1 minute per level. So for 30 feet, so 60 feet, so you're moving at double speed. If you moved at double speed, it'd be 120 feet for essentially 10 rounds. You could cover 1,200 feet. You cover a fifth of a mile in a minute that way without running. That'd only be double moving. If you wanted to run, it'd be 4 times 60, be 240. You would definitely cover half a mile. You'd be under half a mile the other way. So you could use that to move your military fast, or you can have that in reserve, say on one-use items that your soldiers are carrying for a retreat from the battle. If it's already planned that you weren't expecting to win the first clash, but you're not giving up the battlefield, you could get hit the first clash, a couple of rounds of exchange go on, and then you order the retreat. They retreat to the secondary line, wherever that's going to be, leading the enemy soldiers with them, but the enemy soldiers would be too slow to keep up with them. So they would be able to get into position and be able to effectively attack back. Feather fall, that can be useful, but not in a big military implementation. Jump could be okay, but not necessarily super good in a big military use. Magic weapon, it can be, it's not that great for that use. And then back down to reduced person. So looking over these spells, those are the ones that stood out to me on how they could be used militarily. As we dive into the other levels of spells, we'll be able to start picking back on the old spells and start combining them and making some very interesting spells that could really change a battlefield. If this helped you come up with new tactics and new uses, or even understand the spells a little bit better, let me know. I plan to make, like I said, up to 6 level spells for each arcane and divine. And I just decided to start with the arcane. So that's what this episode was. And if you find use in this, hit me with a like and put a comment down below. Till we meet again.